What's up, everybody? I'm John Middlekauff. You know what I need you to do. Subscribe to our YouTube channel. We got content for days reacting to every NFL game all the time, every single day. Subscribe, like the videos. Let's go. Appreciate all you guys that watch, that interact, that leave a comment, share it with your friends. Make sure you're subscribed to this video. We're on a drive to 100K, trying to make my parents proud, and we really appreciate you. Hopefully, you're doing well after Thanksgiving, still eating some leftovers. I know we still are. I had pumpkin pie for breakfast the other day. But today, what we're going to do is we're going to do a big mailbag. At John Middlekauff is my Instagram. DMs are wide open. Fire in them. And, typically on Tuesdays, last week was a little weird because the holiday, but I'm trying to kind of backtrack and get to some of your guys' questions. So fire in my DMs. Very, very easy to interact on the show. We will we'll have more podcasts throughout the week. We will be reacting live on Thursday night after Lions Cowboys, which is really twofold. One, it's just an excellent game. And two, the Thursday after Thanksgiving, to me, always has a little bit more juice to it. Typically, they take two good teams, and they get a full week's rest. So it's not one of these janky, well, one team has to travel 4 hours and no shows. Like, there's a lot on the line. I mean, the Cowboys are still fighting for the division. The Lions are just trying to stay alive after being in the NFC Championship game a couple years ago. Last year, being the number one overall seed, obviously lost in their first game against the Commanders, but we'll be all over that. I'm pretty fired up. I got to be completely honest. You guys are my people. Some of these Thursday night games, I mean, depending on the matchup, can be a little bit of a slog. That is not what this one feels like. We've had, obviously, the Thursday night Thanksgiving games were freaking awesome, and especially the first two. And this one's going to be sweet. So make sure you subscribe so you don't miss that. Let's just dive into the mailbag. Again, at John Middlekauff, my Instagram, fire in the DMs. We will start with Jonah. What's exciting about the Bears and the Pats is they feel like they can be good for years to come. They both have great young coaches, a high-end coordinator who likely will not be a head coach, and a young core. What do you think the difference makers between teams who have a good season or two and teams who can sustain high level of play? Well, it gets down to two things: quarterback play and coaching. And I think you're seeing this with the Lions. I get a lot of DMs. I get a lot of people conversate. Ben Johnson is just a fascinating individual. Is anytime the head coach is a guy like a Harbaugh brother, John Harbaugh, I guess they are brothers, John and Jim, Dan Campbell, Mike Tomlin, they can be pretty quarterback dependent. Pete Carroll, right? And, these guys all have philosophical beliefs, right? Jim Harbaugh running the ball, running between the tackles is something he's always going to do. Pete Carroll, defense is his baby. And even offensively, he has specific things that he wants to do. That's why Chip Kelly clearly been leaking things to push back on everyone shitting on him about that he forced him to run Shane Waldron's offense, which there's probably some validity to it, right? And I think some of these older CEO-type coaches have big picture beliefs on how they want to run it. But like 60 times a game on offense or defense, Mike McDonald, Matt LaFleur, Kevin O'Connell, Kyle Shanahan, Sean McVay, Sean Payton, Andy Reid, like they're touching the field with their play call. They are impacting the offensive or defensive plays. And that matters. So to me, like the thing that you just said, Ben Johnson, his superpower is his play calling. Clearly, leadership and organization, he's good at that. But he's an elite play caller. So you will never lose that. So even Caleb Williams, like if he can never figure out this accuracy issue and it's not going to derail the franchise. Mike Vrabel has this offensive coordinator. The defense is Mike's baby, but the offense, when you have a good young quarterback, like if Mike Vrabel had an offensive coordinator like Josh McDaniels 10 years ago and people are going to hire Josh McDaniels, you go, this could be a problem, right? When he had Arthur Smith in Tennessee, it went pretty well. Then he lost him, and it wasn't quite the same. So, like, Josh McDaniels never getting hired again in the NFL. I guess you never know with college. As of recording it, they currently don't have a Penn State coach. And once upon a time, Penn State hired a Patriot coach named Bill O'Brien. So I think keeping coaching continuity. Look at the Chiefs. They've had, during the Patrick Mahomes run, Andy Reid, Steve Spagnuolo, Patrick Mahomes. Really their core group, Chris Jones and Travis Kelce. So you need a core group of guys. Forever, it was Bill Belichick, Tom Brady, Matt Patricia, Josh McDaniels, Brian Flores, the majority of the 2010s with Edelman, with Gronk, with McCourty, with Hightower. So you kind of have a core, David Andrews, kind of have a core group of guys. And that message never graduates out of the program. And so I think continuity at the top matters, right? Because owners never really change. But if your coach and the play callers don't change, your quarterback doesn't change, and your core 2 or 3 star players don't change, like you're kind of cooking with gas, really kind of matters. I mean, the 49ers could have unraveled this season, but they got Kyle. And so when they went to the backup quarterback, like he could make Mac Jones look pretty good. And while they lost some core guys, they still had George Kittle and Christian McCaffrey. Right? So you got to have core high-end players. That really, really matters. My question is regarding Michael Penix, but not just him in general. Why do teams draft players with long injury histories? I can understand a broken bone or other injuries that aren't likely to repeat, but both ACLs and other ligaments seems like it's a ticking time bomb that can be seen from miles away. How much also, okay, I would say this. As a GM or a coach, you can't predict things with bodies. You can give educated opinions on experiences. But when your team doctor that's at, if you're a LA team, UCLA med, the Niners, Stanford med, Philadelphia, Penn med, I mean, the team doctor or the people interacting with your health and wellness side of the operation are the best in the business in the cities you live in. So when they tell you, I don't think this is going to be a problem, are you supposed to dispute them? It's why most GMs during the draft process or coaches during the season will go, listen, I'm not a doctor. I'm just kind of going off what they tell me. Because most of the coaches, they make their living with a whistle around their neck, right? So you kind of have to go off the information that the doctor is telling you. If they go, he's never going to tear his ACL again, or this. I mean, he wouldn't say that. But if he goes, he's no more likely to tear his ACL than the other guy who's never torn his ACL. Are you supposed to just dispute him? Now, I'm sure that happens sometimes, and sometimes it's on the flip side. And I think this is what drives coaches and GMs nuts, is they will have players that their medical team, that the lead investigator in whatever the doctor is that goes through the checks, either during the physical time, during free agency, or during the draft process, and goes, I can't recommend drafting this guy. I don't think he'll ever make it to a second contract. Or like this, his shoulder or his knee is a ticking time bomb. You hear that a lot. And then all of a sudden you look up and he's made 5 Pro Bowls and $150 million. And you go, we didn't have him on our draft board. So I think it's a lot of back and forth. But it's hard to, you're just taking educated guesses. And obviously, the more information you have, if a guy's missed as many seasons as him, you could have taken an educated guess. Is his body going to make it? So I think him specifically, Penix, it's fair to argue, like, should he have been off draft boards? And I'm sure he was. He was not on every draft board, right? So it's personal preference. It's teams, medical teams. Danny Cannell, his dad used to be the doctor for the Miami Dolphins. And when Saban was the coach, told him that Drew Brees' shoulder would not last. And he went to the Saints. And then Saban a year later goes to the Alabama Crimson Tide. The rest is history for both guys. So what's Saban supposed to do? Like, no, I think his shoulder is going to be fine. It's kind of a tough predicament you find yourself in as a football guy with the doctor crew when they're telling you one thing and you're like, I better hope you're right. And then all of a sudden he gets signed by a divisional opponent and then he's kicking your ass. You're like, what the hell? There's been a lot of arguments in that world over the years. That's for damn sure. And it's never really going to end because the football people can't go off anything more and like, are you sure? Are we sure? Hey, John, at the start of the season, do you think Myles Garrett would rather have the sack record or the Browns reach the playoffs? Well, in his career, just thinking off the top of my head, I don't think he's gone to the playoffs many times, right? The 1 year with Baker in 20, and then the 1 year a couple years ago with Flacco when they got killed by the Texans. Uh, so he hasn't had much postseason success. My guess is what he would say is, I'd like to have a good season, my team to be good. Would I just rather have the sack record and my team suck every week? I think he would probably go, well, I would just choose make the playoffs, and I'm pretty confident I get 15 to 20 sacks. Again, I don't know the guy. Now, if he ends up with 30 sacks, let's just say he ends up with 30 sacks. I think most people at the beginning of the year would sign up for 30 sacks. And I think he'd also say, if I have 30 sacks, I bet we're pretty good. Turns out, no, you're not. Today's show is brought to you by our new presenting sponsor, Hard Rock Bet. The Hard Rock Bet Sportsbook app is the only legal sportsbook for whenever you're in Florida. It's also live in Arizona, Ohio, New Jersey, Indiana, Tennessee, Virginia, Illinois, and Colorado. Coming soon to more states, too. Sign up today and you could win $150 in bonus bets. Just place a $5 bet, and if it hits, you not only get your winnings, but you also get $150 in extra bonus bets. Plus, Hard Rock Bet offers new promos daily, plus big legendary reward drops every single Thursday. It's like gifts under the tree. So whenever you're listening, just open the app up and check out what you've got waiting for you. Download the Hard Rock Bet now and make your first deposit. For the bag. When LSU fired Brian Kelly to aggressively target Lane Kiffin, why wouldn't Lane tell LSU when they approached him that he wanted to focus on his contractual agreement with Ole Miss for the time being and resume negotiations in 6 to 8 weeks? What would LSU have done? Snipe Summerall? It's clear they wanted Lane, and I bet he could have got the best of both worlds. Or do you think Lane was nervous of maybe getting upset in the playoffs and hurting his chances of getting big money or even the LSU job as a whole? Penn State is waiting until the end of the season to make their hire. Did LSU just want to ruin Ole Miss's season since theirs was pathetic? Loved the pod. Maybe Lane genuinely thought Ole Miss would roll over and give him everything he wanted. Honestly, it's believable since Lane can be delusional. I do think Lane, looking back on him making the E60, was trying to change the narrative this summer because he had planned to go somewhere else this fall if a big-time opportunity opened up. And I think based on last year, no jobs open up. He had a pretty good idea. There were some guys on the hot seat, especially Florida, right? Jimmy Sexton represents Billy Napier. He knew he was in a lot of trouble. So there were going to be some job openings. So he was trying to change the narrative. I'm a much better guy. I'm not this scumbag, toxic person that you all thought I was years ago. So he started actively doing that. Probably didn't imagine his team was going to be in the playoffs. And honestly, he definitely didn't imagine LSU was going to come open, whatever it did, a month into the season. When did Kelly get fired? In the middle of October. So that changed the equation. But I would imagine there was a point in time where he thought, they will let me coach and then I can leave. And that became clear to him that was not going to be an option. There were probably conversations that, Lane, you're kind of lucky we think you're going because you're not signing our contract. We shouldn't even let you coach the Egg Bowl. Like, you're already set. The moment he sent his family on the quote-unquote fact-finding mission. Now, listen, Ole Miss is not Alabama, Georgia, LSU, Ohio State, right? So when I say that those programs never would allow it, I think people would push back, well, Ole Miss should be lucky they're even in this position. And there's probably some truth to that, but that's not how you feel once you're in that position. You know, if you're married and you start getting worried that she's kind of sleeping around, and then you get some evidence that she's definitely sleeping around, like you got a couple choices. You either draw a line in the sand and end it, or you kind of tuck your tail between your legs and just try to figure it out. And I think Ole Miss tried to figure it out, and they had to look in the mirror and kind of like, we feel awful about ourselves. We're getting played here. We're getting used. And this is not like LSU stealing our coach. They hate us. They're a rival of ours. And it's weird. We're business partners with them in the SEC, but we don't act like that, right, in terms of stuff like this. because even the NFL doesn't allow anything even close to this. So it's a complicated situation, right? With the timelines, the rules, which there aren't any. You can just steal coaches. I don't think it's as black and white as everyone has taken stances on. There's clearly a lot of gray area. I do believe, though, that Lane was pretty delusional about ever thinking that he could, because if LSU didn't hire a coach, let's say for the next 2 weeks, they just haven't hired a coach, it'd be pretty clear. If everyone else hired coaches, that Lane's going there, and you're going to let him continue to coach. You could even make the argument, the story just broke a little earlier today, that they're going to let Charlie Weis Jr., who's going to be Lane's offensive coordinator in LSU, continue to coach Ole Miss through the playoffs. I bet if I was having a beer with their AD, he'd be like, listen, we're kind of desperate here because we need one of those two guys to call the plays. And obviously Lane's not going to be doing that. So is this the ideal situation? Of course not, but we kind of need him. And it happens other places where assistants get to stay. So it's not as crazy, but in a perfect world, we would not do this. But he is, I think Lane would call some plays during the season. I've consumed a lot of Lane Kiffin content. I think Charlie Weis Jr. was the primary play caller. Lane would chime in, like he's a part of it, and like give ideas and even like override occasionally. But like Charlie Weis Jr. is the play caller. I just think Ole Miss really wants to win one playoff game. They have a home playoff game. The rankings are coming out here in an hour where I'm recording this. Either the 19th or the 20th. They're going to have a home playoff game. They want to win that playoff game. If they win that home playoff game, their season is an undeniable all-time great success. If they lose that game, it would really, really suck. You lost your coach. You lost the game, especially if it was ugly, depending on the matchup. I mean, there are some matchups depending on where they got ranked that could be pretty hard, right? A Miami, a Notre Dame, I guess Oregon probably would have a home game as well, but it could get a little weird, and I think they're just desperate to try to win that game. You never want to negotiate or make a decision out of desperation. Sometimes we don't have a choice, right? I've been there, you've been there, where it's like, I don't want to be doing this, but I have to say yes. I have to do this. And it feels like there's a part of Ole Miss doing that with Charlie Weis where they just couldn't allow Lane. I also think the SEC is it's like the NFL meets Bravo Real Housewives. That's kind of what it is. And it's why it's so entertaining. Their motto from Greg Sankey is it just means more. It's true. It does just mean more. But if the NFL allowed this, it would happen as well. It 100% would happen. If you allowed teams to poach coaches, you don't think like Jeffrey Lurie a couple years ago would have offered Sean McVay like $30 million a year? You don't think that this would happen in some programs where coaches were stolen left and right, especially coordinators? It would happen all the time. It would be an arms race on steroids. The difference is these are big cities. There's more going on. These are little ass towns. It's like, you don't think we're going to spot you and Layla driving around in the two nice neighborhoods in the area? Like, this is not Chicago. I don't know how big Baton Rouge or Oxford are, but they're not that big. Question for you. I think the quarterback reclamation projects in the last few years, Baker, Geno, Sam Darnold, Daniel Jones, are all overrated. They all walked into above average systems with competent coaches and above average weapons and played pretty well. None of them have won or will win more than one playoff game in a season. It takes real strength to go from joke to a plus starter, but do you see any of them playing in a conference championship game? It's a good question. I think they already were the reclamation project was leading a team to the playoffs. If you go from Baker Mayfield, traded for, then benched in Carolina, cut, then go to the Rams, then go to Tampa on a $4 million 1-year deal and have a competition in training camp, go on to be the starting quarterback, get extended, take your team to the playoffs every year, that's like a grand slam. It's not like a walk-off grand slam in the World Series, but that's like a playoff grand slam. That's pretty incredible. What Sam Darnold has done this last year and a half, we just don't see very often. Of course they happen in good situations. How often do you see Like, go around the greatest quarterbacks ever and go, pretty bad situations. Last time I checked, Joe Montana had Bill Walsh. Tom had Belichick, and he inherited a great defense when he was young. Peyton Manning had Tony Dungy and Bill Polian. Last time I checked, both guys are in the Hall of Fame. Now, I think I would take Peyton over those two, but my point is, like, those two know what they're doing. Tony Dungy was winning a lot of games in Tampa. John Elway, I don't exactly know the situation in Denver in the 80s, but by the time he won big, like, it was a lot going on in Denver with Mike Shanahan. Pretty good situation. Brett Favre traded, Mike Holmgren and Ron Wolf traded for him. Like, there aren't many all-time great quarterbacks who went to, this team sucks. Just figured it out. That's not usually the way it works. So they go hand in hand. Like, Geno Smith has no chance on a bad team. Patrick Mahomes wouldn't look that great on the Raiders. And we all agree Patrick Mahomes is way better than Geno Smith. No one's playing well on the Raiders. But if you put Geno Smith this year on the Colts, he'd probably look fine. Honestly, might even be better than Daniel Jones. So I agree with you, but I also think you can't resurrect your career in a situation that's awful. It's not possible. And it just doesn't happen. Give a gift that will endure far beyond the season. When you support Folds of Honor, your generosity creates a lasting impact, providing educational scholarships to the spouses and children of America's fallen and disabled service members and first responders. Donate before the year's end at foldsofhonor.org. Your gift honors their sacrifice. It becomes their legacies, education, career, and future. Your gift builds a better tomorrow. I was watching the show with Colin the other day, and he mentioned Mac to Minnesota, which as a 49er fan is kind of scary given the injury history. But what about Mac for Jefferson? I know there would need to be more picks, logistics, but I mean, Minnesota has got to know by now you can't win with Jefferson without a quarterback, and the Niners would trade picks anyway. I kind of like where you're thinking, and this is a little Madden-y. One, Minnesota fans, obviously they're desperate for a quarterback. They would never allow you to trade Justin Jefferson in a Mac Jones type package. I also think Kyle Shanahan learned a valuable lesson. It's really very, very hard to follow all the information with the Brandon Ayuk saga. I'm honestly Brandon Ayuk out. I don't really care beside the facts that we have that the 49ers clearly can't wait to get rid of him. And by all accounts, you give up $25 million. He clearly can't wait to leave. I was adamant about the situation that it never made sense to invest in a guy who was catching 75 balls a year, and the cost of wide receivers, and he's like a second-tier guy, was $75 million guaranteed. Well, Justin Jefferson is the elite of the elite. The 49ers don't play like that. Like, to me, the 49ers would be much more inclined. Like, you know who they would love is like Trey McBride for the Arizona Cardinals. They're not going to have a Randy Moss, Justin Jefferson, Jamar Chase catching 120 balls a year. I just have a hard time ever seeing that happen in this offense with Brock Purdy. That's not really the way. I bet if we look back at Kyle Shanahan's years, what's the most productive wide receiver he's ever had? Andre Johnson was really good in 2000, probably 8, 9, 10, 11 range. I'm looking at Julio's big year. Their big year when the Atlanta Falcons went to the Super Bowl, 2016. He had 83 catches and 1,500 yards. The previous year, they weren't as good. He had 136 catches and 1,800 yards. And I'm pretty sure the Atlanta Falcons, they were not a playoff team. To me, Kyle Shanahan's whole offense is much more predicated running the ball and really tight end throwing the ball to running backs and the wide receivers. I don't want to say like play. They're much more Robin than they are Batman. So I just think Justin Jefferson, if I'm going to do a crazy trade, I'm more inclined to go get a Max Crosby, to go get, some good tackle than I am to trade for Justin Jefferson. Now, if I'm the Patriots or, some of these other teams, I'm much more interested. But the 49ers, the way they operate, just to me doesn't make as much sense. Appreciate the question. The question is asked before the season happened because I wholeheartedly agree that Myles Garrett is past TJ this year. But why has everyone thought he is mounds above better before the season? Because aside from this year, TJ was a lead in every stat aside from quarterback pressures and has always said his sacks don't matter as much as people think. That's why TJ, to most, has never been considered as good. But now sacks are the reason he's the best ever. I think I'm not going to argue over two players. Listen, TJ in his prime was an elite dominant player. The forced fumbles, the creating the turnovers. There was a momentum aspect with him. He was like the defense's version of Steph Curry. There would be him coming around, him creating a fumble, and then it would just flip. Von Miller had this level to him. I think the argument's more is like Myles is just a more talented player. I think Myles is one of the most talented players ever to be in the NFL, just physical gifts wise. Now, just pure sacks. Like if he ends the season with 27 sacks, is he like the greatest defensive player of all time? Like, no, I think Belichick would tell you it's Lawrence Taylor. He's still better. And I'd agree. But I think the sad part about a guy like him, and the Browns have had a couple now with Joe Thomas, is what would he look like on like the Ravens or on the Rams or the Chiefs or the Eagles? Just a team every single year in the mix. The Packers. And we'll never know because he got stuck with the Browns. Can you list your top 5 quarterbacks that you would start your franchise with? Assuming all healthy. Love the pod. Well, I think you have to factor in age. You know, Mahomes is now 30 years old. So I'm going back to the world of like in your late 30s, you're going to start slipping. You're no longer playing like the 45 thing. You see it with Rodgers at 42. I'm not counting on anyone playing into their 40s ever again. If you are able to do that at any position, especially quarterback, that's a bonus. Most guys, 37, 38, 39, start falling off a cliff. You know, it's what Stafford's doing at his age right now is pretty incredible. And even he's like kind of threatened with retirement. You know, the Rams kind of play it year by year because they're trying to mitigate their risks. They don't want to get into a position where they gave him like a 3-year, $150 million deal. And then going into year 2, he's falling off a cliff because of age and wear and tear. So, like, Josh Allen, I think, is a little younger than Patrick. But I think when you factor in all these guys' ages, especially the way he plays, Josh is 29. I bet Lamar is probably 27. And Lamar this year's, I mean, kind of taking a pounding. Lamar is 28, and he'll be 29. So, I mean, how many more years does, like, Lamar and Josh physically just completely dominant? Like, because to me, they are much more likely to show signs of slowdown in their early to mid 30s than just like kicking ass all through their 30s. And Patrick will be 31 here next year. So, like, I would bet on young guys. Now, again, I'm a little bit more of a renegade risk taker when it comes to investing. So I got no problem taking some swings. Open Door's been pretty good to your boy here. And most people would have said I'm high on crack cocaine to invest the amount of money I did a couple years ago. And that thing was heavily in the red. Don't get me wrong. It's not like it's always been profitable. But when that thing started ripping, it started ripping. So to me, I'm going young. And I mean, listen, like right now, Drake May, you talk about a guy that is, how old is Drake May? 23 years old? Is he even that? He's just turned 23. He'd be pretty up there. Jaden Daniels, I would have bet the farm on him last year. It's always a little risky with younger players because, you know, like part of what makes Josh, Lamar, and Patrick, like why I have such high respect for those guys, they've been doing it at such a high level for a long time. Like part of being a great player is like Peyton Manning, Tom Brady, Aaron Rodgers, like every single year you knew what you were getting. Some for 2 decades, some for 15 years, some for 12, 13 years. It's a long time. A lot of guys, these guys are all pros, right? And especially a lot of these quarterbacks. We just talked about Sam Darnold, Geno. A lot of people have had a good couple year run. Can you do it for a decade? Like Google Travis Kelce's stats. He's been catching a lot of balls for a long time. That's hard to do. And so it'd be pretty risky. But I would probably be inclined to take a swing at some of the young guys. The safe thing would be like, just give me Josh Allen for the next 3 or 4 years. And if I win a couple championships, if I build my team right, then it's all worth it. But I'd like to sustain success. I mean, if I'm a Patriot fan, I'm pretty high on my own supply right now. I'm feeling pretty good.